Welcome to another episode of the Taming Hindrances podcast. As always, my name's Phil. I'm the host and creator of the podcast. That big bearded fellow on the internet that likes to tell you about things. Another episode for you, brought to you by our wonderful tarot card deck. You can head over to taminghindrances.com/the-archive. There is a link to the deck I use. It's on Amazon. It's called the Mystical Manga Deck. The art is by Ron, R-A-N-N, and the text by Barbara Moore. Fantastic deck, especially if you're into like fantasy and manga and that kind of stuff. One thing I'll say up front before we get into the episode, if you're interested in this whole tarot thing, I have this inclination that the deck is kind of important. You can use the traditional decks like the Rider-Waite deck. I think that's like the one that most people say is like, oh yeah, the traditional Rider-Waite deck. But there's a lot of new decks out, and I think it's important for there to be a variety of artworks that more people can connect with. I've bounced around between some other decks that I've seen and used. So take some time, if you're interested in this stuff, to look at the different types of decks and like specific styles that kind of resonate a little bit more with you. It's the same thing for tarot card readers. If you get into that kind of stuff, there's plenty on YouTube. I have some links again on the archive to some people, but it really should resonate with you in some way. And I'm bringing this up in the beginning of this episode because that's kind of what this episode is a little bit about. The title of this episode is Energy, and not just energy like electricity. No, energy. The actual thing, we define as energy. We're going to go over Merriam-Webster's dictionary's definition for that, and we're going to expand upon it and talk about all of these different forces that kind of fall under this category. We're going to talk about chi. We're going to talk about ki. We'll talk about prana. We'll talk about chakra, which it's actually the chakras, not chakra, as the energy force. Prana is the force. Chakra is the gateway. But first, as we have been doing, and as I mentioned in the beginning, we'll start with the tarot cards that got us here, or got me here. Maybe I'm a little crazy, but this is how I read these. First card is the Three of Cups. Three of Cups is a representation of revelry with friends, a joyous occasion of getting together with friends. Sometimes it's a open invitation to let out your extroverted side and to, go, I shouldn't say extroverted, because that's kind of where I'm going with this a little bit and how I got there to this energy topic is this card represents like being with your people, your tribe, you're the type of people that, reflect who you are, and that could be yourself. I will mention that. I'm a very introverted person. I spend a lot of time alone, and I have spent a lot of time alone in my life. And the individuals that I do hang out with or have hung out with in the past, very small groups, not large groups. And a lot of times I don't have people that I share a lot of, I won't say interests. There are people that obviously share my interests, but people who don't share my specific interests all at the same time. Because I'm kind of wide breadth in that. Some people are narrow of view when it comes to my, narrow field. There we go. Narrow field when it comes to my interests. Others are, just like part of their field is like a small piece of mine. So it's, it just doesn't always work out that way. And I think that's kind of part of being an introvert in some ways is you build up a small group or you just get used to being by yourself. And you don't need other people to give you that energetic factor. In fact, I know a lot of introverts, including myself, who a good book will get us energized. A good fantasy novel or maybe it's a good nonfiction, maybe it's a memoirs of some sort or just something on a topic that we're really interested in will give us energy because we will just chew through that book. That's where this card kind of started this idea. I'm like, where are we going with this? Three of Cups is not something that sticks out to me because I'm not one of those people to go seek out a group of people to hang out with. I'm not even the type of person to go seek out one person to go hang out with. That's just not how I am. I spend a lot of time alone and I have a lot of my own interests, which is very different than my work life. My work life is where I'm extroverted. My work life is where I'm dealing with the public and I have clients and, I have relationships with the people at the location I work with and I own my own business. And I don't, necessarily have staff, but I work in a location that they have staff and, there's an owner to that business. And so it's kind of multifaceted in that point. That's where my extroverted side comes out. But I'm introverted in between, and I'm introverted in my own home, my own personal life. And I'm even introverted in my moments where I'm not either teaching at the gym I teach at or, doing body work with my clients and doing massage and body work and stuff like that. In between those periods of times, maybe when I'm just doing my own workout, very introverted. I'm very just, hey, how you doing? I'll bow or not, but I don't really engage all that often unless it's work related. Then I become more of an extrovert. Next up is the Knight of Wands. And the Knight of Wands is a representation of an individual who is on a passionate quest. Remember, I talked about passion back in episode 49 about passion is something you're willing to suffer through. So a passionate quest would be something that's so important to you that you're willing to go through some suffrage to get to the end, to get to that end goal. And with the Knight of Wands being a knight, sometimes knights can get so focused. The knight cards represent an individual who can get so focused they lose track or sight of some of the things around them. And the Knight the Knight of Wands here, this knight is specifically someone who would get lost or lose sight of the individuals around them that are their biggest cheerleaders, or the individuals that are showing them the progress that they're making, or the individuals who are representing the gains or the correct path. And they'll just kind of forget that they're there, just keep trotting along trying to get to this end goal and not really paying attention to that too much. This is our, dare I say, A-type personality, atypical personality of which, like, do it myself, gonna get there, do it all myself, not pay attention, put my head down, and, grind it out type of person. They themselves find energy in different ways, just like the extrovert, which is kind of the Three of Cups, finds their energy from other people. The Knight of Wands finds energy from the accomplishment of the goal that they're working towards. And then we also have, next up is the Eight of Cups. I'm sorry, Knight of Wands. Next up is the Eight of Cups. I think I said Knight of Cups, but it doesn't matter. My brain's going a mile a minute as usual when I get into podcasts. I take a nootropic and I drink a cup of coffee before every podcast episode. That's like my ritual. So that's kind of where I'm at right now sometimes, where my brain just starts going crazy. But all right, so next up we have the Eight of Cups. And the Eight of Cups is a representation of the person that follows their heart, right? Everything might be going great. Like, job's going well, home life's decent, blah, blah, blah. Everything's pretty normal, pretty good. But there's this call of action, or just this thing tugging on the heartstrings, pulling a person almost unperceptively to others towards something. It's so unperceptible to others that others might find them to be acting weird or strange or out of the norm, or just like, what the hell are you doing? What are you thinking? Because the logic and reason that they're seeing is like, yeah, this person has a good setup. They're doing well. Things are going well. But they just go off and they go on this quest, or they go on this other tangent that maybe not everybody agrees with, but something in themselves is pushing them that way. This is, in my opinion, a good representation of the introvert, of the individual who secretly on the sidelines or in the back room, or, on the way to the party or away from the party, is just having these very difficult anxiety moments or other moments of, is that really what I want to be doing? Is this really who I am? Am I not accomplishing the things I want to be accomplishing? Like, very in their head, very doing that. And so they pull energy from this other option, this other thing they can seek out that, again, is talking to their heart. And I explained last episode that I had now defined, the episode 55 Tao episode, that I have this definition now, right? We've defined self, and this is going to be important for the next card here. We've defined self as body, mind, and spirit. We've talked about the combination between spirit and mind, and we've called that soul. We talked about that in the 53 and 54 episodes when we talked about essence and mastery. And then last episode, I defined the connection between mind and body as heart. So that's just the vernacular I'm putting on it. And we've talked, when we talk about put their soul in it or put your heart in it, they're two different things. When someone puts their soul, their essence into it, they're talking about putting that spirit-mind connection into something. Whereas when someone talks about putting their heart into it, they're talking about putting the body and mind connection into it, the effort, if you will. So the next, keeping that in mind, that's where I'm at definitions-wise for the vernacular of what I'm calling self-awareness. Awareness being the attention to intentions. We move on to the last card here, which is usually my clarifying card that I use to kind of give a combination of what all these cards are really telling me to talk about. And the last card is the Four of Swords. Now, I don't have a ton of personal history with pulling tarot cards and using tarot. I've done it in the past, and I'm learning more now, and I have for the last couple episodes, so I'm a couple months in. But I've seen a bunch of tarot readings. I've watched tarot readers work, done my own, seen some. I don't think this card comes up very often. I don't think the Four of Swords is a very often a card that pops up all the time, because the Four of Swords has a specific representation, and that representation is step back and rest. There is no answer right now. You're seeking something out. You're putting everything you can into something, and it's just not. You could work as hard as you want, and you're not going to get the answer. You're not going to get the result. You're not going to make the breakthrough. So you need to step back and rest, and then it'll come. When you take that moment not backwards, but take that moment to just kind of like, you know what? I'm gonna sleep. I'm gonna sleep. I'm gonna take a nap. I'm gonna go to bed. That moment allows for the clarity. That moment allows for the rest, the restorative nature, and then you can move forward. This is what brought me about. I was looking at all these cards, and I'm like, what are they trying to tell me? Trying to tell me to have a party that's passionate, that speaks to my heart? Is that what the Three of Cups, the Knight of Wands, and the Eight of Cups were telling me? I'm like, no, wait, hold on. That doesn't make too much sense. And then I pulled out this, not pulled out, but the Four of Swords popped out, and then it all kind of came together. Oh, this thing called energy. Because each of these cards represents a different type of person and gets their energy from different places. Not to say that these are the only archetypes, because we know that's not true. In fact, in the tarot deck, we have most of the archetypes, the major arcana. But this Four of Swords represents, like, where is the respite? Where is the restorative point? Because you need to go back to that. You need to step into that. And so each of these cards is kind of like in that realm of things. So like, where would the Three of Cups need to step back and take a rest? Too much out there, too much partying, too much. So it almost represents the warning that some of these cards can hold, but it also represents, like, if you need to take a rest, then you're clearly out of energy, right? You're out of go. And so what would the rest look like? Maybe. Well, for the Three of Cups, the rest might look like more time with friends, but like in just a slower pace and a more reflective nature. For the Knight of Wands, it might look like stepping back and enjoying or working with the people around you who are your cheerleaders and pushing you forward. So we go from the extrovert to kind of the ambivert, or the atypical personality type, that more of an ambivert, more of the middle ground, to the, Eight of Cups over here, where we're talking about someone who is very, more introverted and focused on their own end goal, while everyone else is kind of paying attention to the frothy foam up front, the nice picture in the front. Really, there's a lot more going on. That person might need to step back and just take time for themselves and retreat into themselves and away from everybody else and just kind of do their own thing. So all of that said, it brought me to this idea of energy, because it's something I talk about quite a bit. In fact, when I teach Tai Chi, or just, in general, talk to people about the bioelectric field and these things, when I talk about Chi in general, which is kind of where we're going with this, we're talking about energy, this thing called energy. It's a big term getting thrown around in the metaphysics metaphysics world, the woo-woo world, the Breath 3 Guru douchebag world, the yoga world, not that yoga is Breath 3 Guru douchebags, but the yoga world, the meditation world, all of these different things talk about these quote unquote energies. So I thought, let's talk about what they are, or what it is, or how we can use it, and how can we apply it to our mental health, our self-awareness, our spiritual natures, and the energies that can be quote unquote spiritual as well. So stepping over the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, energy definitions: a noun, dynamic quality. Cool. The capacity of acting or being active. Okay, that's, physical energy, mechanical energy. A usually positive spiritual force. Interesting. Let's go over those three again, so that's definition 1, A, B, and C. And I think if we break it down, you'll see a correlation. Dynamic quality. Dynamic quality. So dynamic quality is it's like narrative. It's like a narrative energy, like qualitatively it's dynamic, which means it's broad, right? Or it's combining or pulling things together. Now I would have put that as 1B, but they use it as 1A. Next up, the capacity of acting or being active. Well, can be physical activity, right? And then a usually positive spiritual force. So I think just in those three definitions, we hit mind, body, and spirit. I think we hit all three. And you can even mix them up and call them different things, but it's a denotation of the mind can have energy, the body can have energy, the spirit can have energy. And we have defining pieces for that in some cases. And we'll get into that in a little bit here when I start talking about the other synonyms of energy. But let's go into the next definition here. Vigorous exertion of power, also known as effort. I talked about how important effort is back in episode 41 and how we should celebrate effort over achievement. Next up is a big one. It's a fundamental entity of nature that is transferred between parts of a system in the production of physical change within the system and usually regarded as the capacity for doing work. This is the Newtonian or the Newtonian physics definition for energy. I'll save that statement for a second. Last one up is usable power, such as heat or electricity. So it's usable power. Interesting. So that definition is what allows things to have the capacity to hold energy or to store energy, which is an important trait. The synonyms of energy, though, are where things get interesting, and that's why I have withheld some statements that I'll start to get into now. We have a really poor understanding of what energy actually is as a whole, including in the scientific versions of energy. You know, we understand electricity, we can use electricity, but we don't understand where electricity comes from, nor what it really is. Electricity is the crossing of the dielectric plane and magnetism. The dielectric plane is the representation of what would not be electric, or what's known as counter space, and magnetism, which is a field of pressure motivation in which it both produces and collapses its own force. And so when magnetism crosses the dielectric, we get electricity. That's how all generators work. That's how we generate electricity. That's how we use electricity. And electricity is not, the electricity we use, alternating current, is not electricity. Electricity is more DC. Direct current is really what represents electricity much better than what AC represents. AC is a frequency state of that changeover of the dielectric to the crossover of the dielectric and magnetism plane, but it's not a true representation of electricity. Electricity is more represented by DC. This is Nikola Tesla stuff. This is Faraday stuff. This is Heaviside. These individuals who Robert Boscovich, which is, if you want to step into a realm of shit that you really will probably struggle with understanding because no one really taught you how to fathom it, I would recommend, even I don't get it, and I'm not saying I'm like super smart or anything like that, but I understand other ways of looking at things and understanding things, at least conceptually, so that maybe, you know, I don't get the math, but I might get the philosophical side of it. Robert Boscovich even boggles my brain in most ways, and I have to slowly kind of methodically go through these things. That's another statement I'll probably have to come back to here in a second, but when we talk about Newtonian physics, Newton had a really good understanding of physical energy, right? And he wrote, gave us Newtonian physics, which is, we have the laws of Newton. I'm not going to get all of them right, but we have objects at a rest will stay in a rest unless acted upon by an outside force. He tries to describe gravity without using the idea of a field. So that's kind of where Newtonian physics goes awry. But we have, again, the laws of Newtonian physics, which work inside of that set. And a lot of them do work really well and allow us at least a conceptual idea, maybe not a principal idea, but a conceptual idea of what this thing known as force or energy can be in the kinetic state, right? That's part of our misunderstanding with how the body works, because the body's not Newtonian by definition. The body is actually different. It's ionization, which is more of a fusion reactor than it is, or a nuclear reactor, because technically we're just little nuclear reactors running around doing this thing known as ionization. But moving forward, not getting too sidetracked on that, we have something like Einstein, we have Einsteinian physics, theory of relativity, which the theory of relativity is just relative. Fine. Totally. We can argue it. We cannot argue it. We can, people much smarter than me can talk about this stuff all day long, and no one understands what the hell they're talking about anyway. So it really is a moot point unless you're in their realm of things, right? Unless you're in their three of cups, in their little field, having a party with, high level physicists, it's not really relative, right? So you're not going to gain any energy from that. In fact, you might get bored and start to nod off, which right there, we can see that energy is a multifaceted topic. We can have Newtonian physics. We can have Einsteinian physics. So we can have physical body physics, which again, the body kind of covers another whole set of things, but we talked about electricity and how electricity even of itself is very poorly understood. We don't understand this overarching idea of energy, right? And part of that, we have these synonyms, and we're going to go into them now. One of the synonyms for energy is known as aura. Aura defined as a distinctive atmosphere surrounding a given source. Now, please remove the connotation of people saying, like, I can see auras and the aura of someone. Please remove that connotation. Aura is a word that is defined by a distinctive atmosphere surrounding a given source. Thus, the Earth has an aura. It has an atmosphere surrounding its center point. Awesome. A subtle sensory stimulus is also an aura. That is also known as could be a aroma. It also could be a sigh or a murmur. It could be a subtle meow in the corner could produce an aura or a sensory effect, right? This is what movies do with music quite often. They have the background music and they kind of build a suspenseful or a dramatic or a comedic or an exciting, background sound that creates a subtle sensory stimulus. And then eventually it has a crescendo. It builds into the actual moment, but it always starts kind of faint and builds into, not always, but that's a methodology you can use. I used to use this in public speaking. You can use the idea of a subtle sensory stimulus to build a connection between you and the listener of a public speech or a persuasive speech by adding in these small sensory things. You can clap, or you can snap, or you can tap on the dais or the place you're giving this. There's different little cues that you can give that are outside the speech or even the tone structure of the speech to create a aura or an effect of that nature. Next up, medical is a subjective sensation experienced at the onset of a neurological condition, and especially a migraine or epileptic seizure. I constantly ask people when they talk about their migraines, do you get auras? Do you see auras? And I'm not asking them if they can read someone's aura. I'm asking them if they get a voice color, a numbness, a tingling, some sort of sensory I'm thinking of a word. I hate when I can't think of the right word. Sensory phenomena, or I'm thinking of another word for ghost. It's not a ghost, not poltergeist or anything like that, but it's like a something or other. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm asking them hey, do you get an aura with your migraine? Do you get a central visual in one eye? Is it on one eye on the other side instead of the other eye? And this allows for me to kind of not diagnose, but understand are these migraines vasovascular? Are they hormonal? Is it a mix? Typically, most migraines are a mix. Vasovascular is capillary restriction, so it's restrictive blood flow. I'm sorry, you're suffering from vasorestriction, which is capillary restriction of blood flow, and so you get the necessity for muscle-induced tension, which causes a tension headache, but that's vasovascular because the muscles are tensing up to push more blood flow or cranial flow into the brain. Or it could be hormonal, which has to do with the endocrine system and what's going on there. So when we talk about migraines in that regards, I'll ask people hey, do you get the auras? And people who suffer from migraines typically know exactly what I'm talking about. They'll be like, oh yeah, I get the bright light, or I get the tingliness, or I get the, skin crawliness. That's a thing you might get every once in a while. Or they'll get colored, their vision, because that could be the pressure that's pushing on their ocular that gives them that color spectrum that they see. Moving on. Next up, definition for aura is an energy field that is held to emanate from a living being. Okay, now we're working into that aura effect, right? Also known as a luminous radiation, that's known as a nimbus. But when we talk about the aura of an individual, what we're talking about is their bioelectric field. You produce a bioelectric field constantly, all the time. Your heart produces a bioelectric field. I talked about that last episode when we were talking about EKGs. It reads the sine wave of the heart. Your MRIs read the bioelectric field of the body. We're producing this constantly. And we've developed the vagal nervous system, or the vagus nervous system, to read that in our surroundings. So when we talk about energy, we're talking about a multifaceted idea here. We also are talking about, so we'll come back to some of this, but I want to get through some of these other synonyms first. We're talking about chi. We're talking about ki. Chi is the Chinese term, ki is the Japanese term. They are not the same thing, but they are the same thing. I know it's really complicated, but you have to kind of think about it that way. You have to think about the system in which it's being defined in, and then how to use it thereof. Just like when we talk about Newtonian physics, we're talking about physical mechanical movement, physical mechanical energy. Going back to the definition of energy, vigorous exertion of power. That would be considered Newtonian physics. Usable power, the conservation of energy, Newtonian physics. So when we talk about chi or ki, we're talking about that specific system of understanding that energy. What is chi? Big topic. And I don't necessarily agree with how Merriam-Webster's dictionary puts this together, but they use ki, Ki, as a entry to chi. Chi can be spelled C-H-I, it can be spelled C-H'-I, it can be spelled Q-I. Bunch of different spellings out there as far as the romanization of it. Chi is actually also the 22nd letter of the Greek alphabet, just in case anybody wanted to know. But with what chi is, their definition, I'll just start with that. Their definition: vital energy that is held to animate the body internally and is of central importance in some Eastern systems of medical treatment and exercise or self-defense. How have I come to understand chi? That's a better way to approach this. Because again, chi, ki, prana, all very similar, right? They're their own systems of understanding though, and we have to kind of come back to what's a more central understanding of that. To give you a definition of what prana is a life, breath, or vital principle in Vedic and later Hindu religion. So that's when we talk about prana. A lot of times when people talk about chakra, they're actually talking about prana, but they don't necessarily get into that conversation because chakra is kind of been thrown around a lot. The definition for chakra, Merriam-Webster dictionary, is any of several points of physical or spiritual energy in the human body according to yoga philosophy. Now, here's where I'm going to piss some people off. Yoga philosophy. There's no such thing as a yogi in Hinduism. Doesn't exist. A yogi is anyone who practices specific breathing types, and yogic, you can be a yogic practitioner, which is to just do specific breathing sets, has nothing to do with the poses and all of that stuff. That's just an aid. It's just like a tool. This also goes back into when we talk about Tai Chi. I'm going to piss some more people off. I teach Tai Chi. I don't teach traditional Tai Chi. I have experienced both, actually all three of the Sun, Feng, Yang style, Sun style, Yang style, and Chen style. I've experienced all of them, practiced all of them. I do a blend, a modification to the Yang style short form that incorporates both Sun and Chan style as well. Tai Chi is a discipline of an understanding that has to do with meditative movements. What is meditation? Awareness of breath. What is yoga? Awareness of breath. So when we talk about these understandings, this is why I say it works inside the system. You can't use chi in yoga. It doesn't work that way. You're using pranic flow through the representation of the chakra points. There are also more than 7 chakra points. Last time I checked, there's 108. Maybe it's 110. I don't know anymore. It expands quite large. You start with the normal 7. That's the original you learn. Then you learn the 13, which is an extension above and below the body into what's known as the etheric or aural shape of the body. So as the 7 chakras progress beyond the body, we have the shell or the egg, the universal egg that our bodies inhabit and live in. And then you get the 13 chakra points, which later expand upon to the 32 chakra points, which then triple into the, triple, right? I don't know. It's been a while. Eventually it expands out to the 108 chakra points. Yes, because there's another 4 sets on either side, which gives you 6 sets on either side, which gives you 38, triple 38, 10. No, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for this conversation. I know I'm getting it wrong, but the big thing to take away here is you start with the 7 chakra points. It expands out to 13, then there's 32, and it goes on from there. So there's more than what we just talk about in normal yogic practice, but chakra is not. It's not universal vital energy, because that's what all these represent. They represent and I'm going to go back to the definition of chi, because it's the one that gives us a little bit of the closest understanding. Just the beginning part here. Vital energy that is held to animate the body internally and is of central importance. Perfect. It goes on to say in Eastern systems, but I like that just as a clean definition. But it's a vital energy. That's the best way I've ever described chi. Is it's the vital energy in the body. Going back to the definition of energy, dynamic quality, the capacity of acting or being active, a usually positive spiritual force, vigorous exertion of power, a fundamental entity of nature that is transferred between parts of a system in the production of a physical change within the system, usually regarded as the capacity for doing work, usable power. Chakra, very importantly to understand, is not that vital energy. Chakras are, the word chakra is better defined. The translation is better defined as wheel. It looks like a wheel, and it's actually more of a vortex or a vortice, and it spins. And it's the point at which universal energy is refined and passed between the universe and the body. What occurs after that is the use of prana. It in fact bolsters prana, which are the prana's the Hindu understanding of vital breath, vital energy, and that is the defined energy system there. So we have other systems that use the chakra points because the chakra points line up very well with most Eastern understandings of the human body, as far as when we talk about acupressure points, meridian lines, meridian points. But it is the Ayurvedic understanding of these wheels. It's Vedic by nature, which is these, they're defined as these wheels or vortices or vortexes that allow both entry into the body. That's why they're shaped like lotuses. Have you ever seen like the lotus flower? Because that's what the lotus flower represents, is this spiral vortice pattern that blooms and both gives and takes energy universally. And they represent different parts of the body. We have the root chakra, we have the navel chakra, we have the solar plexus, we have the heart chakra, we have the lung chakra. And I got this wrong in the last episode. I'm correcting myself now. We have third eye and crown. Last time I said third eye and mind. It's not. It's again from the base of the tailbone, root, navel, solar plexus, heart, throat, third eye, crown. Those are the original 7. And there's more above that. There's 3 below, 3 above, and then 1 above that, which gives us There's 3 above and 3 below, which gives us 13. Why am I going over all this, right? That's like, Phil, where are you going with all this? When we talk about energy, we have to talk about the systematic ideas of energy and where they go and how we use them. And it's important to note at this point how we understand them, right? If Newtonian physics makes sense to you, then that's your general basis of your dictionary, which then becomes your translation device when we talk about other systems. If you understand chi, great, start there. If you understand ki, start there. If you understand prana, start there. If you understand chakra, a little bit different. You're really actually like working with more of a Newtonian physics basis as far as Newtonian in this representation. Newtonian physics would represent mechanical energy. Chakra points would represent universal energy, or energy we don't really understand. What is the connecting factor there that will better bring these things together? Well, in fact, it's a synonym of energy. It's called vibration. The definition of vibration, as far as Merriam-Webster's dictionary, is quite long. I apologize ahead of time, but here we go. A periodic motion of the particles of an elastic body or medium in alternately opposite directions from the position of equilibrium when that equilibrium has been disturbed. Think about a chord or a string. Plays a musical note, creates a vibration. Next definition, the action of vibrating, the state of being vibrated or in a vibratory motion. Perfect. Let's keep going. An instance of vibration. Vacillation in opinion or action. That's a character of a person mostly. You can be wavering in that sense. Okay, well, let's go back and unfold this first definition. A periodic motion of the particles of an elastic body. That fits into the definition of a field, which would be all encompassing. So you could have, or plane, field or plane. So field is the pressure motivation of planes or multiple planes that are interacting with each other. So a periodic motion of the particles. That's a little scientifically microcosmic, but not microcosmic enough, nor is it macrocosmically big enough. If we just bring this whole sentence together, a periodic motion of the particles of an elastic body or medium, okay, medium, good, in alternately opposite directions from the position of equilibrium, when that equilibrium has been disturbed. This is balance. We start at neutral, no energy. Then there's a disturbance. This disturbance occurs in we'll just say direction instead of giving specific directions. It happens in a direction away from equilibrium. Equilibrium being balanced, there's a motion in any direction away from equilibrium in which the disturbance then causes a reaction to the opposite direction of that disturbance. That is vibration. So anytime something moves out of balance and then must move back towards balance, but typically we know overshoots, that creates a vibratorial state or something in vibration. That is energy, right? So if we go back to the definition of energy, that would be a dynamic quality. That something is in vibration. And even something that's not in vibration is still in vibration, because really it's just a measurement of the equilibrium. Anytime something's not in motion in vibratorial state, it's still in a vibratorial state because we might not be able to see it. We often look to think of things as in a vibratorial state only when we can see them moving. But the fact of the matter is, even at the atomical scale, things are in vibration. They're moving. Crystalline structures are vibrating. Everything around you is vibrating. This has to do with octaves, and we use the Hertzian frequency range to measure things, but everything's in a vibratorial state. If it wasn't in a vibratorial state, it wouldn't exist. This is a very important piece of what energy means and what energy describes. So we have dynamic quality. We have the capacity of acting or being active. Capacity, right? Equilibrium, no more equilibrium, back to equilibrium. Eventually we will meet back to equilibrium, but there's a vibratorial state in between. Now the sustained vibratorial state is what would be considered a frequency, when we can measure the difference between the trough and trough and crest of a wave. So we have wave function or wave measurement. Also defined as usually a positive spiritual force. So we know microcosm and macrocosm, right? I know I'm throwing out a lot of science stuff and a lot of other weird stuff. Energy is universal. The body has energy, the mind has energy, and the spirit has energy. The measurement structures for them are vast, right? Newtonian physics, Einsteinian physics, theoretical physics. We have a bunch of mathematicians out there that think they know a bunch of shit about stuff, but they really just know how to do like math and create theoretical math, which if you're creating the thing that you think you know, but then tell other people you don't know, but do know a lot about because you've invented it, I have questions. Not that they're wrong, just there's some questions. We have chi, we have chi masters, we have ki masters, we have prana masters, we have yogi meditations working on chakra points. We have the understanding of chakra points in general, as well as the acupressure points, meridian points, the fascial system, which is what we use more so in modern Western understandings of things, and how the fascia corresponds to this capacity for energy, and how it can also dictate the expansion and or absorption of energy. We have the active energy of caloric use in the body, ATP production, which allows us to actually move. It's a resource of sorts. Energy is all encompassing. Energy is a necessary function for temporal existence. And so when I talk about two very important definitions, vernacular wise, when I talk about self, now that I've defined it better as mind, body, and spirit, we have the connection between spirit and mind, or mind's understanding of spirit, which is soul. And we have the connection between body and mind, or mind's understanding of body, which is heart. Just vernacular otherwise. The energetic situation there is multifaceted, and there are many, many different understandings of it. This is how we can say we have an energetic body or a spiritual body. This is how we talk about out-of-body experiences. This is why we talk about transcendental meditation. This is how we talk about physics and how kinesiology works with the body. It's how we make the connections between these things. It's how imagination becomes real in the form of using effort to make our imagination come into the world, also known as magic. I talked about in episode 51. Energy, because it is so multifaceted, there is no universal understanding. This is, in fact, what string theory is trying to figure out. This is what theoretical physics is trying to figure out. They're trying to figure out a grand idea of what this thing known as energy is and how fields work and all that stuff. Well, nobody can really define a field, but I'm not the one to do it. This universal representation, right, understanding, cannot be universal without an understanding of all three of these pieces of self. Because we're the reference point. The mind is the reference point for all of these things. That's why the connection of mind and body is heart, and the connection of mind and spirit is soul. The connection of spirit and body is mind. The connection of soul and heart is something else. And I'm not ready to define that quite yet. But the connection of spirit and body is known as the mind. It's consciousness. It's somatic. It's awareness. It's ego. When I talked about in episode 50, it's I think what we would define as consciousness. The awareness between the spirit and the body, known as the mind, is awareness. It is consciousness. It's that idea. Without that representation, we can't have the translations, and thus we can't have the expenditures of energies. And we've never defined a universal energy, except we understand that there is one. We define this theoretically and also metaphysically as light. And that light is the vibratorial state of all things. That light is the flat plane of measurement of vibratorial states, where in that definition, all atomical structures are light or a vibrational state of light. And thus light is a vibrational state of light and has different factors of vibration. Vibration is the measurement of light. And thus the classic understanding of light that we often kind of represent of brightness is just another measurement. We think of light as a measurement structure. That, oh, it's light outside, and thus the sun is shining. That's a measurement. It's actually really, instead of it being light outside, it's bright outside. It's just a measurement of the brightness. And brightness is a measurement of the reflection happening around you. When a light is bright, it's because it's putting out a high state of frequency, but what makes it so bright is its reflective nature. It reflects off things because it's at a higher vibrational state, which means it doesn't dissipate. It, in fact, breaks apart and bounces around a lot. The sun is very bright because it puts out a ton of vibrational energy that breaks apart and bounces around all over the place. And instead of it being light, it would be better defined as being very bright, because light is just a vibrational state. We have the visible light spectrum, which is a quantifiable understanding of a Hertzian frequency range between, I forget what it actually is. We have the atomical vibratorial states, which is what we call the atoms, or the vibrational states of everything from helium to whatever the heaviest element is. I should know that, but I don't. Was where we get the periodic table. Sorry, the periodic table is the representation of the heaviness, but is also the octaval vibrational states in which things make up. We have the representation of ki or chi or prana, which is the bioelectric field. And because it's bioelectric field, it's a measurable frequency state that the body is producing. And this has a big effect on us because we have this whole thing known as the vagus nervous system, which is constantly trying to represent an understanding to our brain of energies. In fact, we're constantly seeking light. Why I bring up the whole chakra thing and all that stuff. So when we talk about the different chakra points, right? One of the biggest ones people talk about is the third eye chakra, the point right above the brow, in between the eyes, just about an inch and a half, 2 inches, not even 2 inches, probably about an inch and a half. It's usually 2 fingers breadth above the center of the eyebrows. It's actually 3 fingers. If you take your ring finger of your right hand, place it upon, or left hand, doesn't matter. It's usually the same. Your dominant hand is really the one you should use. Take your ring finger of your dominant hand and place it on the bridge of your nose, the very center part. Wherever your index finger ends up is where your third eye is. The third eye is the representation of where the point of the pineal gland would be, pineal. Looks like a pine cone. And that gland specifically has rods and cones. Rods and cones are the things in our eyes that pick up the different vibrational states of light and then transform it into an image in our brains so that we can have a sensory pickup of the world we live in, the world of materium. So energy is built into our sensory systems. Our sensory systems are what measure energies and produce the reality, quote unquote, we live in. This is why a lot of the ancient doctrines talk about or warn of living in a simulation. Because you are. Your body is picking up all sorts of vibratorial states. All of our senses pick up one of them. The eyes pick up the vibratorial states of light in the spectrum in which the eyes pick up the vibratorial state of light. The ears pick up the vibratorial state of light of the compression of sound waves. which is the bouncing off of other other light waves against each other, which creates a audible situation which we can hear. Now, there is a set of frequencies we can't hear, but we can measure and we know they exist. Touch picks up the vibratorial state of matter in its physical, quote unquote, physical vibratorial state. That is materium. That is light become hard. Light that vibrates so fast, it's hard. So it has magnitude or has an ability, a structure in which we can touch and work with. We'll leave that there for right now. Smell, just another vibratorial state. It's, things produce smells by producing a smell is almost, and I might be the only one that thinks of it this way, but smell is like the hearing of light. Right. When it comes to, if we had to make the representation of eyes to ears pick up the bouncing off or the interplay of light, visual and non-visual spectrums. Ears pick up on that pressure wave. Smells are the things that your nose, your olfactory system picks up the smells, which are the interactions of physical, the touch sensory. So things that we can touch off gas, if you will, think about it that way, their interactions with each other. It's these small interplays of the chemical bonds that make up the crystalline structures of the atomical structures, that those moving in vibration together produce smell. With that, so we have sight, sound, hearing, touch, taste. Same thing. Taste is chemical, though. We know it's chemical. And so it's the interaction of the breaking of the bonds of their vibratorial states that we taste. And we have sensory pieces around the tongue. There's 5 sections of the tongue that taste different things, and they're designed to pick up different tastes. We can keep going on and on with this, but our body and with the senses is designed to pick up all this information and then give it to the brain. Your body's a giant antenna. It's a giant listening device. It's just this really complex, really interesting thing that picks up and reads all of the energies around it. And then the brain puts together a simulation, which is the reality in which we live in. And that's why energy is such an important topic, because what we're talking about here at a very grand and also microcosmic schedule at the same time is an understanding of the universe we rarely look at. That our bodies are simply modem apparati, reading input. They're machines in that way. They are reading the usable power, reading the vigorous exertion of power, giving dynamic quality, the capacity building capacity to act or use. They're number 3, a fundamental entity of nature that is transferred between parts of a system in the production of physical change within the system, and usually regarded as the capacity for doing work. They are measuring all of those all the time in all of the different spectrums that make up the ones that are most important to this system of the body and mind connection. That measurement of energy at that level is what makes up our reality. Or, no, I'm sorry, one step away. It makes up the information that becomes our reality. And so when I talk about depression being something that's universally separate, it's the way in which you see the universe. It's what makes you universally different than everything else. It's what makes you so unique is your methodology of your depression. That's really what I'm talking about. At a very deep level, which is probably why I haven't brought it up till now, or not that I haven't brought it up to now, that the cards are finally putting it out, because we're getting to that level. We're getting to the level of understanding that depression, your depression, is uniquely who you are. And the reason for that is because you're so uniquely built that your sensory apparatus, the body, the thing that reads all of the energy inputs, all of them, even the ones we don't even think about, are constantly picking up the vibratorial states around it, transferring it into some usable translation, and then sending it to the mind so that the mind can create reality. And this is also why I say chaos is what came first. Because really what your body is reading is chaos. We live in chaos. We live in infinite possibility, right? And that's why chaos comes first in the cycles. Because your body is reading chaos. We are children of chaos in that regard. We're reading all the chaos around us, using our body to do so, and then using that information to input to the mind, which then creates, which is why we are our own creators, the reality in which we live in. Because we literally do. We literally create the reality in which we live in. We are all together deciding at specific points in times agreements upon things. That's hard. That's soft. That's light. That's dark. That's tasty. That's not tasty. That smells weird. That smells good. But we never all really agree because we're all experiencing something very different. We're experiencing the same energies. Our sensory system is picking up the same things, the same vibratorial states. The vibratorial states around us are a shared experience. The translation, the depression, is the piece that's never the same for anyone. And so it's preposterous in my mind, when thinking from that regard, to think that anyone would ever get along, to be honest, because there's just no way, if the machines themselves are calibrated differently to pick up these different energy patterns. Or I'm sorry. Yeah, the machines are calibrated differently. Like, they pick them up, but then like it gets to this mind that translates differently. It's preposterous to think that we would all agree or would need to agree, because it's always going to be our creative reality. Now, that works in different regards as well. We can use that in the world of self-awareness, and we can use that in the world of mental health to understand that these sensory inputs, right, that the body's giving us are ours to do what we want with. That's why I say we are an omnipotent presence over our bodies. We are the gods of our bodies. The bodies are just there. They're just machines. They're just coral reefs. They're just fleshy coral reefs. These weird fleshy things that do stuff for us include picking up all the vibratorial states around us through our senses, through just our vagus nervous system, things we don't even think about. The vagus nervous system is picking up vibratorial states, specifically the bioelectric and electric fields. This is that feel you get when you know, around high powered lines or electricity that is open, not insulated. It's the feeling you get where, you know, someone might be like super pissed off or like angry, and you get that vibe from them. You're breeding the vibratorial states. Now, complex vibratorial states might take on emotional representations, and thus we can read that through the vagus nervous system, through the vibratorial nature. We also read things because we have a bioelectric field. This is the state of having chi, having ki, having prana, having vital energy, having piezoelectricity. There we go. That's always around us. Our bodies are surrounded by, and this is what we're talking about in the metaphysical states of talking about aura and talking about vibratorial states around the body. The use of ki or chi outside of the body, I use it specifically when I do chi healing and those types of things. I won't get into my story about Reiki right now. I won't stand on that soapbox just right now. Your body has a field around it that you don't feel because you were born with it and you've had it ever since. You were inside your mom's, bioelectric field, then you were outside and you were super pissed about that. And then you had to get used to your own. And so, yes, children experience things differently because they're experiencing a non-dumbed down experience. There's no buffer. It's just fucking input chaos. Try to understand chaos. That's what children are doing. How, do you expect them to like cope with that? No, it's fucking ridiculous to think that. Children are just being bombarded by the most ridiculous shit constantly, and they haven't developed any systems yet to figure it out or to make up their understanding of reality. They're just constantly taking in mass amounts of inputs that we as adults don't think any differently of, because we've come to understand them, or we've come to buffer them, or this is, you know, my understanding of how I deal with other people. I'm a massive introvert. Okay. I get really frustrated with other people sometimes. Sometimes I just want to hide away from them. There's just those people out there that are like huge extroverts and they just like don't shut up, or they just like do, and they don't take other people into account. There's, you know, empathetic, sympathetic, and all that stuff. But I can understand because I see it from a different viewpoint of this world of energy, right? The child is being overwhelmed constantly. Their small little bodies and undeveloped minds are being stressed with these outside energy forces that don't go away. And in fact, actually, in some cases, ebb and flow and become greater. You know, this is what we're talking about when the moon, you know, there's a full moon and the magnetical pulse or pull of the moon can work against the water bodies of the earth. We're a water body. We're mostly water. You don't think its magnetical force can act upon us? Of course it can. It's also when we talk about grand solar minimums, which we're in right now, and how the corona of the sun shrinks and we get more background radiation, or just radiation in general from electromagnetic radiations and stuff like that. The skin of a child is thinner than ours. It hasn't had time to build up, nor can it dissipate over a larger factor of fascia. I have more fascia in me than a child does. I can take more force. I can also take more radiological force or electromagnetic force. All of these other vibrational states, my body is just bigger. In that regard, I'm a 270-pound big wannabe Viking. That's much different than even someone who's 270 pounds and 6'6". I'm only 5'10". They have more surface area to deal with all this stuff. They have more fascia involved comparative to someone who's only like 5'2" and like 110 pounds. Like, just this vast differentiation of how energies can affect one person. Now you put that in the regards of someone who has thinner skin or is unwell in some way, has inflammation issues, and thus can't dissipate outside vibrational forces differently. This is why energy is so important. It's a topic that we don't often take into account because we're used to thinking of energy in electricity or Newtonian physics or Einsteinian physics, or that woo-woo shit people talk about, and this whole aura thing that's all, you know. No, it's all encompassing. It's top to bottom, and it's what our bodies are designed to pick up so that we can understand the world we live in. The human body is a fascinating thing, and it's constantly giving us all this information. And yeah, for the child, it can be overwhelming. For the person with PTSD, it can be overwhelming because they have so many sensory apparatus. They have been overwhelmed and are just not functioning with any buffer anymore. So they don't know how to block things out, or they don't know how to, you know, come back to a normal state. In my situation, it's typically anxiety that I get over an interaction between two other individuals because I just pick up so much information that I dwell on it constantly. I run it through my head. Like, did I say the wrong thing? Did I say the right thing? Did I give them the wrong information? What kind of, you know, opinion do they have upon me? These are energetic states. These are energetic manifestations of understandings that the body has given me, either through visual acuity or auditorial, taste, smell, touch. Any one of these senses is an input that I have to deal with. And so my mind doesn't always cope very well with it, and I get anxiety states. The energy input is one of the most important things. There's also energy output. What gives us energy? What focuses us? What drives us? What motivates us? The differentiation between the person that's the Three of Cups, the extrovert, the Knight of Wands, the person who's the ambivert, kind of in between, doing whichever one makes more sense for them, be more extroverted, be more introverted, but dealing with it in like, you know, it's also, you know, this is also a representation of personality types. You know, we can get into Freudian psychology. We can get into psychology and just in general, or, you know, all of these different things. And then we have the Eight of Cups, which is the introvert person who's just like following their calling of some sorts. But really, the overarching here is the Four of Swords. Sometimes you got to step back and take a rest. You got to take a break. Isn't that what the body typically tells us? Is like, yo, I took in way too much information today. Way too many vibratorial states. I need you to like shut me down for a little bit and go into this REM sleep or non-REM sleep place. So what's really occurring there with this whole sleep thing? I wanted to get more into this topic, but it's just such a big, broad topic. I don't think I have enough time. I would push you in the direction of seeking out Andrew Huberman, who does a lot of talk about sleep. Even sleep.com, not a bad resource, just to kind of learn about like what happens when we're sleeping, why it's so important, why a lot of us don't get enough sleep, how we can get better quality sleep. But part of this is every day we bombard the body with a fuck ton of vibratorial states. Just a metric fuck ton. Between the sun and EMR with the electromagnetic radiation, our vibratorial states of speaking, the music that we hear around us, the sounds and sights, and all of these things are vibrations. The world you live in, this vibrant, beautiful world, full of sounds and sights and light, is just bombarding you every day. I can't deal with the sun very well. My eyes don't cope with bright things. They just don't. And so I get overwhelmed by very bright objects or bright, not light, bright situations. Sun and I, we don't get along. Put some sunglasses in between, then I'm all right. Also the same thing with sound. I don't do well with loud sounds. Not a fan. Don't like loud sounds, loud noises. Not a fan. I cope with them in some cases, but I don't like them. Overwhelms me a little bit. Makes me uncomfortable. Understanding how you deal with energy is a really big step in the realm of self-awareness and specifically mental health and understanding your depression. How you come to grips with these energies and how you deal with these energy structures is very important. But I don't think a lot of people get placed in the situation where you can understand it from this angle. Of energy is not just what we use to get through our day, it's what's bombarding us through our day as well. So where we have mind, we have mind energies. Where we have body, we have body energies. And where we have spiritual, we have spiritual energies. And all of them can deplete, drain, increase, pick up different responses and converse with the rest of the situation as well to create this reality which we talk about. I'm just talking about one specific piece right now when I'm talking about the body and all the vibrational states it picks up. The mind also does that through the nervous system, and it's collecting all of these vibrational data from the body, but it's also collecting vibrational data from itself and vibrational data from spirit. The mind is the interplay in between. It's the idea of the body connected to the spirit. It's where it does the translations. So if we want to talk about spiritual vibration, what does that kind of look like, right? Because I've been delving down this spiritual thing and trying to understand intuition, instinct, all of these other sensory apparatus that we get that have an effect on the body because the mind translates that downward. So when the spiritual nature comes in and we get that point of instinctual nature, or we get the understanding of let's just call it a spiritual vibrational state, right? That has some sort of input that we need to heed or listen to. The mind creates its translational point. Well, the mind's so busy paying attention to the body that it typically will create a physical representation. This can happen with the chills effect, or the erector pili muscles, the muscles for our body hair, standing up, activating, goosebumps. Some people call it goosebumps or goose skin. We might get that kind of pit of the stomach feeling. We might get the pull on our heart. We might get the the slight heart palpitation of like, oh, did the dump. I don't know if anyone's ever felt that before. Some people have, I'm sure, but typically that happens maybe in a romantic situation where you just get that like heart almost skips. They call it heart skips a beat, where you get that. It's not so much that it skips a beat; it's that you get a really like active dump dump, and that's the heart in its vibrational state using the sine wave of your heartbeat and activating the heart muscle really hard into beat like dump dump. Like that very hard thud, because we feel it as a pressure that pulsates in the chest, right? And we get that, that heart pull, or, we might get the drop, the just that real low, and just where like our heart, like our stomach just drops, and we just get the, I felt that one in my stomach kind of deal. These visceral, if you will, feelings. These are the mind trying to translate back to itself a loop, in my opinion, of the spiritual side of vibrational states that we don't always pay attention to because we don't have a great translation for that, because we're too fucking busy paying attention to the physical state, trying to figure out what's trying to kill us and what's going on, because we got this animal brain, this lizard brain thing going on of fight or flight, and the autonomous and central nervous system with the conscious nervous, and just like the nervous system in general telling us all these vibrational states, but we're typically only paying attention to the physical side of that. And even then, we don't pay attention to that very often. We don't pay attention to the vibratorial information the body's sending us, because it's often trying to send us not only the results of what it's been finding around us, but also trying to tell us about the system. And this is why I say systematically it's really important when we break down, like, are you using chi? Are you using ki? Are you using prana? They have their own systems. They don't work across the subsets. I'll step on the fucking soapbox. Fuck it. Reiki is kind of bullshit. Reiki's bullshit because you don't need to be attuned. That's a money grab. You need to be introduced. And yes, maybe that takes requirement and training, but you don't need to be attuned to it, because Reiki is an understanding of using ki with chakra points, which is not where ki works. The introduction of chakra points into the ki system is an outside intervention, which is a modernization. Not that it's wrong. I'm not saying Reiki is not effective. Very different statement than Reiki being kind of bullshit. You don't need to be attuned in Reiki or learn Reiki to use what they consider to be Reiki. Reiki is ki at a distance. There's another name for that, and Chi uses it. The Chi practitioners use action at a distance. It takes a really, really long time to even fathom and or understand or use ki at a distance. It took me 5 years just to be able to start to affect someone else's chi field or their bioelectric field with my chi. It took me 15 years to get where I'm at with my very minuscule ability of chi manipulation inside of my own body and or in my own self that I can practice and have practiced the last 5 years to affect someone else's with it. Specifically, I'm just okay at reading. I'm okay with listening chi. So for someone to say that you need to be attuned and all of a sudden instantaneously you can just turn on this thing of ki at a distance using these things known as chakra, a little bit of bullshit to me. Not that it's not effective. I've seen people practice Reiki and other people get results out of it. What that looks like at a very active level is a conversation of energies at a spiritual level. You are having a spiritual level energy conversation that the mind is translating into a healing effect to pay attention to the specific areas of the body that need to be paid attention to because they've been calling out for it for a very long time. But we don't pay attention to that. So sometimes we need outside intervention. And in fact, I would include now in the health and wellness world the option or almost necessity at this point of manual manipulation. And that manual manipulation does not have to just be the mechanical manipulation of what I do, which is body work. Can also include the energetic manipulation, which is a manual manipulation of the energetic field, bioelectric field, to pay attention to the part of the body that needs some sort of intervention, some sort of outside effect. Because we stop listening to it. And in fact, we stop listening to it so much that it can no longer get its signals across to tell the brain like, hey, hi, I need help. Help me, please. And so we often forget to take our Four of Swords moment. We forget to take a moment where we just kind of take a break. So we don't take a small break. Sorry if I shocked you with my quietness there. I actually need to just take a drink, and I don't usually drink on during the podcast, so I have to mute myself to do so because I don't like that sound when people do that, so I try not to do it. And I usually try to challenge myself to get through a whole podcast without drinking, which I know is a terrible habit, but I do it anyway. But yeah, we don't usually have our Four of Swords moments, which is where we just take a rest. As a body worker, as someone who does manual manipulation to help the physical form of the body, as well as does energetic manipulation, doing Qi Gong healing and such, I'm not healing anyone, is how I like to put it. And in fact, I don't think I do heal anyone. Help? Sure, certainly. Yes, I will agree that I help. And I know I try to say humble about all this stuff, and people yell at me constantly about I'm being too humble, but and I guess even in that statement now, I'm kind of getting over being humble about it. But I'm not healing anyone. I'm reminding your body about itself, and also acknowledging like, yeah, I know the mind has totally forgotten about you over here. I'm really sorry. We'll try to get the mind to wake back up by sending the signals to get blood flow back into this area, to get chi or ki or prana, whatever it is, back into this area. And as much as I say that the systems are so systematical, the energy is universal. It's light-based. And thus I know chi can affect ki, and ki can affect chi, and prana can affect ki, or chi can affect prana or ki. The work that's being done by the body is by its own understanding. You build your reality. It's all of this sensory apparatus giving you vibratorial states that you make sense of, and to make up your own reality and your depression. I can just come along and use my understanding to affect yours. And this gets into a really dangerous situation, a really dangerous understanding of my regard. And I'm using danger as like a shock and awe feature here, because I want people to understand it this way. In Chinese martial arts, we have something known as FAT, F-A-A-T. And FAT is a representation of reality. With that, and the knowledge of, have I stated before, that all war is a simulation of the mind, and you are at war from the moment you are born. You're in a simulation warfare situation, and people are conducting war for your attention. People are also conducting war about your vibrational states, your vibratorial states. And so the FAT, the reality in which we build, can be used, that understanding, to great lengths when it comes to that vibratorial state. What are you getting at here, Phil? There are ways to use one's vibratorial production and understanding to affect others. And it's what's called imposing one's FAT, or imposing one's reality. It's very plausible, and also not just plausible, anecdotally I've done this, and it kind of scares me a little bit that I can do it so well, as it should. It should scare someone that if they can do it well. It's better to learn to defend against it, to be honest. But you can apply your reality or impose your reality upon someone else. A battle of wills might be a good representation of that. And we often say willpower, right? Well, power is a synonymic relationship with energy. And so when we talk about willpower, or the battle of willpowers and the battle of wills, that implying of the imposing of one will over another will, or one thought over another thought, or one reality over another reality, it's that understanding thereof. And so we have a conversation of what would be the negatively connotated situation of, I can impose my reality upon you. Now I can do that in a non-connotative, or also a connotative to the positive, because energy is universal. So I can impose my thought, my understanding of chi, on yours. This is known as Qigong healing, in which I use my understanding of the bioelectric field through the flow of Qi to read what's going on with your body, to listen to your body, to have a conversation with your body, and then to find points of either failure or lessening or dimming, and thus work with your bioelectric field using mine and imply my understanding on top of yours. To say, I'm going to impose my understanding of what's going on here and say, hey, this needs to wake up. This is a little wavering. This is a little light, or, I could use the 5 element system of Qigong and say like, oh, this is a little bit too much fire. Maybe we'll cool it off with some water, or maybe this is a little too much. I don't know. What's another one to use? There's not enough fire here. Maybe I'll feed it some wood and get it to build up a little bit. Maybe I'll bolster it. Maybe I don't need to cool it off too much. Maybe I just need to raise the fire a little bit, and so I'll give it some fuel. That's what the 5 element system is all about, as the interplay is there. But I can impose my understanding on that. I can impose my reality, my thought, onto yours to help. I can also do it to hinder. I can impose my willpower, my thought, my understanding of reality to diminish you, to, this is what we do in arguments, and we try to bolster and be arguing, the big roar and be a big presence in the room. I can do it subtly from afar, even. That's what the highest levels of Qi, and specifically Ki practitioners, in the martial arts communities, Ki practitioners are very good at doing this, of implying their presence or their prescience to the room or to someone else, to overwhelm them with your Ki. That is the truest action at a distance for a Ki practitioner, which is where Reiki got the idea from. And that is a conversation at the spiritual level. It's a understanding of what's going on at a spiritual, unseen level in the form of energy. And thus we can absolutely have something called spiritual warfare. We can absolutely have passive aggressiveness that is palpable, or we can even have energies in that regard that are palpable. It gives an emotion or an action a palpability. It becomes so present that the mind translated it to give us a physical feeling. Because it's so important at that point, we need to pay attention to it. That the mind's picking up on this vastly differentiated idea of energy in the situation, that some sort of physical manifestation will happen. This is the idea of stress manifesting in the body. I deal with this every day at my job. I work 7 days a week with the public dealing with these things, where stress manifests in a point in the body and takes root there and causes all sorts of ill effects. And in fact, actually, it can be used positively when done correctly, that a stressful situation can create dynamic tension and allow for an adrenal cortex response so that the body can outperform what it's used to doing. We call this limit breaking. Very affectionately, I call it limit breaking, from also not just the Final Fantasy series, but from some things I've experienced in my own life where we just kind of break the mental boundaries. We break the mental limits. We get the mind to agree, no. It's time. Let the body go to its full capacity. Let it go to the point where, yes, it's probably going to cause itself some harm. We understand that. There's a necessity for that to happen. This is where we show great feats of strength, where something at an energetic level allowed the mind to manifest the idea into the body of, nope, limit controls off. Adrenal cortex response, NO boost, nitrous oxide boost to the blood, pump the muscles full of ATP, oxygenative oxygen and ATP to produce a massive energy boost, so that allow them to then also go beyond their limits of tearing to just allow them to tear. Turn off the sensory apparatus of the nervous system in the area for the pain management cycle to say, you know what, fuck it, it's going to happen. Turn off the pain controllers. Allow the muscles to damage themselves. Because just as the body is in control of sending us all this signaling, the mind's in control. It's like it's the overarching omnipotent presence, where it gets to say like, hey, I hear what you're saying. I don't got time to deal with it. So just chill. Stop lifting that weight. It's too much for right now. I don't have time to send you the resources you need. But I don't also have time to have that conversation with you, muscle. You don't get the resources you need right now, so you got to just chill. And so you get weak, or you aren't able to finish that rep, or you go to failure. And then later when we're sleeping, the body deals with all that compound information. And so we have this capacity for energy to stick around. And this is why sleep is so fucking important. Quality sleep, not just quantity, but quality of sleep. Getting into a non-REM sleep. REM sleep in the energetic community would be the point in time where your body's dealing with all these outside influences that have manifested in some way, and thus has to come up with some complex dream state in which to deal with the backlog of information it's trying to deal with. Non-REM sleep, non-random eye movement sleep, is when we get down to that deep delta level of sleep where the brain actually just goes into a restorative function and says, all right, it's time. We've dealt with the backlog of stuff. It's time to deal with the oxidative stress side of things. It's time to go in to do and create human growth hormone and deal with the damage that has been done. And oftentimes, it's never enough. That's what the modern society is built into us. It's built into this function of go, 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 go. Just keep going. Just nope, more. And so we get into a sleep deprivation. We get into a backlog we'll never catch up on. Once you get into it, talk to Andrew Huberman, a nap's not going to take care of it. So we need some other outside interventions. What do those look like? Well, they look like deep relaxation states, deep restorative states, non-REM, deep restorative states of like getting into a very relaxed position or situation to allow for restoratives in some way to happen. Oxidative stress removal, inflammation control response. We can use outside stressors as well. We can use outside stressors such as heat shock proteins, doing sauna, cryo, doing cold treatments, sensory deprivation, where we get into a sensory deprivation tank, such as like salt floats or doing those float tanks to block out the vibratorial states. I would make the reference that we probably, if we were smart about it, could build locations where people could go into a EMR representation of a encapsulation of interwoven perpendicular and 90-degree cross weave of copper to limit EMR radiation for a small amount of time, but also add that to a relaxatorial state. Maybe it is in a deprivation tank. Maybe it is in a sauna. Maybe it is in a cryo, but adding in that extra piece to allow the body to take a reprieve from electromagnetic radiation, or to do things like Dr. Ibrahim Karim has done in his research with biogeometry to limit the amount of EMR that gets placed around us, to create a breakdown of it. All of these things are doing the same thing I do when I do craniosacral or I do body work, where I give the body the outlet or give the body the reminder to come back to the mind to say, hey, it's time we take care of this function here. Something else is occurring. Now, I also use my understanding of traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and energy and all of its different faceted functions and beautiful ideas, specifically that of imagination, which is the greatest option the human mind has, episode 40 that I did, to work inside of a situation where I know, yeah, I can be an outside influence, but unless we get to the root cause of this, it's not going to change anything. And if it's not going to change anything, then it's not true energy. I'm not truly putting energy into my work unless I'm trying to enact therapeutic change. That is the definition of body work. The differentiation between massage and body work. I'm a body worker. I'm not a massage therapist. I'm licensed as a massage therapist, but I practice body work. I do body work. We may use massage techniques, but body work is the act of therapeutic manual manipulation. And again, because of how energy works, manual manipulation is not just manual in the sense of hands. It can be energetic, and an energetic manual manipulation to wake the fucking bioelectric field back up to pay attention. This is not what the Western world does. This is not what Western medicine does. And I've come to the grips with the idea that they'll never be able to because they're indoctrinated and they're overrun and there's too many patients and not enough doctors. And the training sucks as far as the hours that they're forced to do and the residency bullshit and the hazing and the indoctrination and the amount of information that they need to understand just to practice one thing, because they're going to get sued, and it's baked into the cake that they're going to have to take giant student loans and then charge an asinine amount of money because of the insurance companies. And the whole system has failed. The whole system of the Western medical system has ultimately failed. The fractures have occurred. The breaking point has been applied. The absolute collapse of it hasn't occurred yet because that's what body functions do. The human body is an amazing, amazing machine. It will work through some of the greatest breaks you could possibly fathom. The amount of stress that these bodies of ours can take are extraordinary. Because they're also able to triage themselves and just say, you know what? I'm sorry, muscle, but I can't pay attention to you right now. I know you're completely fucked up. But I have some other muscles that can do the job for you. Take a break. And then we forget about the pain. The pain starts to go away. And we're like, oh, all right, well, I must have just worked through it, right? Nope. That muscle's just not having a conversation with the mind anymore. So as much as I have conversations with bodies in my work, I get the mind to then have a conversation with its own body to wake things back up, to say, hey, like, we got to take care of this. The Western medicine system does that through by going the opposite direction. They just keep masking the problem by giving you a pill and moving you on to PT or sending you off into another direction because they don't have time to deal with you. And I can't blame the practitioner for that because that's not their fault. If they're aware of that situation, then it is their fault, and they probably should start practicing different medicine. But it'd be selfish of me to tell people like that to go and practice privately so that they could treat more people more effectively, because there are plenty of other people out there that also need them. And so there has to be a balance of structure there. It's going to happen asymmetrically, and that asymmetrical balance is going to come by the Western medical system ultimately collapsing. It has already failed. It just hasn't collapsed yet. There's a difference between a building failing structurally and then collapsing. There's a lot of buildings out there that would fail a structural analysis, but haven't collapsed yet. Just like the body would ultimately, most likely in most situations, fail a stress test, it hasn't collapsed yet. So that's where this understanding of energy comes in from. And going through all of this, and I know it's been a long one, and I know it's been long-winded and also in depth to a degree that maybe I have not gotten into before. It's a narrative of looking outside of what quote-unquote energy is and thinking about electricity and all these things, and understanding that it's universally around us, and it's a vibratorial state. And there's many different versions of it and many different ways to understand it. And you kind of have to pick the one you get the best result out of to start. As much as I did get very in-depth, I'm also talking about a starting point here. You can start your journey by understanding yourself spiritually. You can start it by understanding your mind better, understanding your body better. You can start with anatomy and physiology. That's a great place to start and understand how the body works at a very base level. You don't have to go too in depth with it right now. Just, get a very base level. And then you can add to that later and learn about nutrition and why that's important. Learn about sleep and why that's important. Or you can start with the mind and learn about why sleep's important, or learn about the mind in the sense of like what your interests are is a good place to start, and just what gives you that respite. If you're going to have your Four of Swords moment, what does that look like? Does that look like Ben and Jerry's and the fucking Netflix? Great. Awesome. Take a break. Pushing further is not going to get you any further. Are you lifting constantly and need to take a rest day? It could look like that. Are you doing CrossFit? Take a fucking rest day, please. Please. The original version of CrossFit was great. What CrossFit has turned into now is a fucking nightmare. People are injuring themselves regularly. There's very few percentile of the populace who get to actually do CrossFit and not hurt themselves. Those are the CrossFit professional athletes who go to the CrossFit games. And even them are usually doing it broken in some way. So please take a break. Is it a good book? Is it a theater play show that you want to go out and enjoy publicly? Is it a concert? Is it That all that just makes me go, ugh, crowds, no. So I won't be the one doing that. But if it's you, if that's your respite, if that's your rest moment, if that's your Four of Swords, do it. That's where the understanding of energy comes from. Not only where do you get your energy from, because that's a really important conversation for self-awareness and mental health, but also what drains your energy, right? Do you have low batteries? If we're using the electrical conversation here, when we talk about chi, to go even more in depth and go even farther, as I usually do, another, not a soapbox, but another thing I can talk about. We talk about chi. One second here, pardon me. Too many coffee grounds in my coffee today. We talk about chi. We talk about the chi bank. We talk about what chi looks like in that regard and how we can build chi and use chi. And there's a depth of the level of the understanding that comes with working inside the system. And Ki has the same thing. Chakra meditations, yoga meditations have the same thing. Talk about this quite often. When we talk about Chi, we can talk about, I use Chi because that's my reference point, but we talk about this thing called the Chi bank. And what Qigong does is it allows us to build up our Qi bank. If I'm low on my Qi bank, I'm not able to do Qigong on people. I'm not able to, because they would be able to easily overwhelm or apply their thought, their reality to my Qi, right? So I have to be careful in the way I practice or do things. And the two sides of that are Fa and Hua. They go together. It's like yin yang. You can't separate the two. And so there's 5 total. So we have Fa, Hua, Sao, Ting, and Yin. And they all go together. But they make up this thing that gets into the Qi bank. And the way we create Qi inside of ourselves is breathing. That's how we get into that. So one of the things, so Fa is a representation of method. It's the methodology. And so we have different types of breathing. And I learned all of these different types of breath types to, expand upon how to build up my Qi. Because what's the best way to put this? Let me think about this for a second. When we talk about Fa, so Fa's method, right? It needs energy to expand. And if maybe I'm going too far here. So all right, I'll go this route. So if we have yin yang, right? Energy can be expanded, Qi can be expanded both yin or yang. It can be expanded either in a yin method or a yang method, and it can be destroyed or created using a yin method or a yang method. And the idea of energy, the actual output source, is Qin. So you have something like Peng Qin or Lu Qin. These are methodologies. Peng and Lu are action. I'm losing myself on this one. Maybe I'll hurry this up and get through this one quickly because maybe it's not the best option to talk about right now. But so you have something like Peng or Lu. Peng is to ward off. Lu is to roll back. These are methods. These are Fa. These are methods of action in martial sense. So I can use Peng Qin or use warding energy to ward off, to parry, if you will. And I could use Lu Qin, which is to roll back, or I can use roll back would mean to absorb. I could absorb an attack. When we talk about that in the martial practice, we're talking about the interplay of yin yang energies, right? And this is where Fa and Hua come together. The methodologies without the action is that's the idea of the Qi bank. They're 50-50 in that regard. They build upon each other in that regard. So they can't be separated in that idea, because the only way to bring that into we'll just say balance, right, is to use our breathing. And so you start to understand that breathing is a energetic conversation. That's where I'm ultimately going with that. Hopefully I got through that quick enough. Didn't lose too many people. Breathing is an energetic conversation, which is why it's so important. Why I say meditation is just awareness of breath. Apologies again with the too many coffee grounds here. So with that understanding, right? So if breathing is the representation of an energetic conversation, it allows us to think about things a little bit differently. A Four of Swords moment could simply be, take a breath, man. Take a breath. Just take a breath. Just take a breath. This is why in the outro I always say, like, remember to breathe, because it's one of the ways we can communicate with the body and the mind and the spirit all together at one, because it's an energetic conversation. Breathing is, I'll say it again, an energetic conversation. Some part of me wants to say that the combination of soul and heart is breathing, is to have breath, because the soul can breathe and the heart can breathe. And in fact, the heart and the soul are the ways in which we use breath. But I'm not quite there to say that that's connection, because I think there might be a better maybe word or connective way I can put that, or maybe I'm missing something so far. And these cards aren't necessarily telling me to say that. They are telling me to tell people to take a breath, because energy is a universal trait, idea, and understanding of things, and it's a vibratorial state all around us, and we are constantly intaking that. And one of the ways we can affect that and have a conversation with that is to breathe. We can have a conversation with the body. We can have a conversation with the mind. We can pinpoint things and understand things. All of Qigong actually is the methodology of breathing. It's to use the breath and better to understand and to help the body. A higher practice of Qigong, once you understand how to breathe correctly, you can use the poses or the articulation of the body to breathe into specific areas to cause a massage, an internal massage in that area to help wake it up or help it function better. You have something like the Ba Duan Jin, the 8-sectional brocade, which is something I teach, which the movements of the Ba Duan Jin and the breathing that goes along with it, it's a Qigong or a specific Neigong, that allow for one to open up the different meridian points and breathe into the specific systems of the body, i.e. the organs, to help with vitality. And thus we can build up our Qi, because Qi is vital energy. And we can expand our Qi upon multiple different things. We can expand it upon eating or drinking, or we can expand it upon having a conversation or a mental task. We can expand our Qi upon a physical altercation and or physical exercise or exertion. So Qi in that regard is the representation of the interplay of our breath. So is Ki, so is prana. Chakra is the breath of the system to the universe. The chakra themselves represent where in which the body would breathe towards the universe in both universal input and output. And they have a specific representation of the breath in which is occurring there. The heart chakra is the emotional epicenter of the universal breathing. The root chakra is the, not primordial, but base breathing point. Solar plexus has each one has its own quality and function. The crown is usually what we represent as the etherical opening to where we talk to the etherical aura outside the human body conversation of breathing. That's why the idea of breath in that sense is a conversation. The chakra points are breathing in and out. They are intaking and extaking universal energy. And it gets into the idea of what a lot of modern fantasy stuff talks about when we talk about cultivation, to cultivate. But the conversation we have with the energetic systems are multifaceted, just like I started off with. And one of those is this idea and function of breathing. And it's an important one to understand. And that's why I talk about it quite often. But energy as a whole is just it's more than what we think about. It's a topic I think you should sit with and really, really dive into. At a basic level, at a deep level, when I say dive into, I just mean like go to whatever depth you decide. That's your Gong Fu. That's your way of doing things. That's your effort. That's your Tao. That's your mastery. It's your answer to your why questions. It's the magic you bring into the world. It's the essence in which you entail, your passions, the way you listen. All these episodes that I've done recently, they tend to compound upon each other. That's their energetic states to build the chi bank, to build up the energetic nature. These cards from the beginning, 3 of Cups, group of celebration, extroverted nature of celebrating, or not just extroverted, but the act of reflecting in oneself with others of like-minded nature to better understand the reflection of energies. The Knight of Wands, to be wary of focusing energy too much. The 8 of Cups, to internalize the energies and their understandings, and so one can use them for their own thought, their own reality. But also the 4 of Swords, the listening to the energy, be it spiritual, be it mental, be it physical, body. What's it telling us? Is it telling us to take a break, to step back, to rest, to relax, to revitalize, to breathe? Maybe. More regularly than not. And so we go to the definitions of energy. We'll start with the synonyms first. Aura, chi, ki, but specifically vibration. A periodic motion of the particles of an elastic body or medium in alternately opposite directions from the position of the equilibrium when the equilibrium has been disturbed. Your body does that constantly. It's called finding homeostasis. And when you come out of homeostasis, we have disease or illness. And thus you're constantly trying to find a point of homeostasis to come back into the basic vibratorial state. That equilibrium can also be inside of the idea of the vibratorial state that makes you most content. Or maybe you prefer to be happy, or maybe you even prefer to be sad. But what do those vibratorial states look like? What is coming off the equilibrium line and creating a vibratorial state? That's a synonym of energy. We also have ki and chi and prana. Prana being more the Hinduism side of things, but their understanding of the energetical flow inside the body. These things are defined as vital energy. Vital being that of which is essence or necessary. Episode 53. We also have the idea of aura, a distinctive atmosphere or surrounding, a subtle sensory stimulus. Those auras that are responsive to our mind having a conversation with the energies of the spiritual nature typically produce an aura inside of ourselves, a sensory stimuli that we don't always pay attention to. So maybe we should pay attention to auras or energy more often. We can do that by taking a nice deep breath. Energy, defined as the dynamic quality or the capacity of acting or being active, a usually positive spiritual force, mind, body, spiritual. Vigorous exertion of power, also known as effort. A fundamental entity of nature that is transferred between parts of a system in the production of a physical change within the system and usually regarded as the capacity for doing work. Emotions are quite literally the expression of universal energy through the mind. Last definition here, usable power. So I would challenge you to look at your energy sources, your energy depletions, and maybe use the referenciation of however you want to think about it. If you're a fantasy geek like me, maybe you want to think about it as your mana. You know, what's your MP? What's taking away MP? What's giving you back MP? What's causing your mana stores to fill or to fall away? If you're if you like more of the electricity reference, you can think about you're a battery. What's draining the battery and what's recharging the battery? If you're more into chi, same thing. What's bringing you in chi, vital universal force? What's taking it away from you? What are you expending chi upon? What are you getting chi from? I get my chi from a lot of my Tai Chi and Qigong practice. That's what it's supposed to do, is to help us breathe and create more of the chi in the bank. Ki, same thing. We have the breath of ki. We have the expulsion of ki, usually typically in an active physical form. And then we have the rest respite of the form and function of doing things slowly or methodically, or to focus one's mind into building one's ki back up. You can use what are you yogically? Are you looking at your prana levels as far as, are you nurturing your chakras, or are your chakras being lessened or drained? You can think about it in the emotional sense. Like I just said, emotions are a perfect representation, or are the representation of the energy, the effort of the mind. So you can look at, what's draining your energy as far as emotionally? What's draining you emotionally? What's filling you emotionally? Where are you going overboard emotionally? So even though I'm talking about, inputs and outputs, there's also you can overcharge. Absolutely. You can have too much mana. You can have too much electricity. You can overcharge the battery. You can overfill the chi to the capacity of which you're not capable of holding just yet, or have too much ki in that regard. This is what children often are faced with. They don't have enough of a vessel, that it gets overfilled, and they have to just get rid of that extra energy. You have to do something with it. Sometimes that's complaining. Sometimes that's running and screaming. Sometimes that's having outbursts, not understanding the motor functions of their body, and getting frustrated with that idea that mom and dad can pick up the milk jug and pour milk easily, but I can't. That pisses me off. Well, no shit. Why wouldn't it? Or someone who's suffering from, a stress reaction in the body that sees me as a body worker. Maybe that's a refill for you, is to go get drained a little bit by, having a body worker or a acupuncturist or chiropractor work on you to come back into a more aligned state in some way or another. These are all options to think about. Do you just need the fucking extra calories that you're craving? Are you in a starvation mode? Are you overtaking calories, so you really should back off and you would just feel healthier because your calorie intake is way overcharging the body, and the body can't deal with that, and thus it's causing other functions? Yeah, I know we're not supposed to fat shame, but that's the idea of being too fat, is you taking in too much energy. You don't need that energy. In fact, you need to replace that type of energy input with something else. You're lacking the understanding, and I mean that very caringly. I do body work as a fucking living. I like people to be healthy and aware, and to have wellness. That's the overarching subject of wellness. So no, I don't consider this fat shaming when I say you might need to take down the caloric energy intake and replace it with something else, or to define the caloric energy intake differently. If you just like the act of eating, we can get you there by training your mind to understand to eat differently, or to find an exertion in which it balances out your want, or even maybe it's a necessary need to eat a lot, by balancing it out with the output that needs to require to keep you into a homeostasis pattern of input output. I like to tell people, lift more if you can. If you really want to fucking eat, go lift. Go get fucking jacked. You can eat whatever you want as much as you want if you're doing heavy lifting. Now be careful and do it correctly. Get a trainer, talk to a professional, talk to your doctors if that's a necessary or worry or risk. I have to say I'm not a professional in that way, but I kind of am a fucking professional. I do body work for a living. I see how people can break themselves. So yes, I will give you the warning professionally that, yeah, you're going to need chiropractic. Maybe you're going to need body work. Maybe you're going to need acupuncture. Maybe you're going to need physical trainer. Maybe there's always this maybe, because maybe you are a professional and you don't need these people, but you need to have the representation that energy in, energy out. There's always a correlative connection. That's yin yang. That's how chi works. That's how ki works. That's how prana works. That's how vibratorial states work. That's how the universe is constantly seeking balance through asymmetrical responses. So yeah, you can go eat some Ben & Jerry's, or you can eat some Talente. I prefer Talente over Ben & Jerry's nowadays. I don't know why. I shout out to Talente. He makes some delicious products. But you can, you can do all that. You can even balance it out inside of the habit itself. You can have, tea over coffee, or coffee over tea, or you can have, there's different ways to make the energetic balance happen. Maybe it's stop eating so much gluten, stop eating all that bread, stop taking in all that carbohydrate calorie, and replace it with something else, and just get used to that. And eventually you'll be like, oh man, veggies are fucking tasty as shit. Or, oh yeah, that orange is super tasty comparatively to that slice of bread. I know people like bread, so do I. But you know, you can replace it once in a while, that so you can have that other calorie. There's multiple ways to balance out this structure. So my last final piece here is I'm coming up on the 2-hour mark, and I've really made these long nowadays. Apparently all of my episodes are ending at 2 hours now. But the conversation of energy ends with, or not ends with, but comes to the conclusion of there's these balance structures. So yeah, no, I'm not fat shaming, I don't think, when I say, if you really just like fucking eating, you need to do the balance of that, which is to go expend the energy. That can actually look like just getting super into mental work. You can burn a lot of calories with the mind. Some people don't take that into conclusion as well when they think about all the, you know, mental, oh, I sit at a desk all day. Well, no, you're mentally burning some calories, but the body then is lacking its motion. Body needs to move. That's what Tai Chi is all about, specifically the rotation of the spine, to wring out the spine. The body needs to move. The caloric intake needs to match both the mental and physical and spiritual movement. Maybe you're not spiritually taking in enough energy. Maybe you need a spiritual outlet or a spiritual process. Maybe that's the energy input you're lacking, which is what making you lethargic. So you eat too much Ben and Jerry's and you don't go to the gym, or you don't go for a walk, or you don't go for, you know, a quick jog or something like that. And instead you sit on the couch and try to fill the energetic void of spirituality with fucking Netflix. Have I pushed this far enough? And I know I'm going to say right now, I'm not the perfect example of this. In fact, I don't believe there is one. There is no such thing as perfection. Perfection means that you have gotten to the end. You should destroy it and try something new and work for a new, even more perfect item. But that's just because I like imperfect things. In that regard, I think I have pushed this far enough. I think I have done what I typically try to do, which is to negotiate some sort of mental thought process response to the things I'm talking about. And specifically with energy, I'm talking about understanding how you understand energy, you know, and then looking at how that understanding can be used to balance out what's going on. And not only that, but also to have better relationships and the understanding of like when your partner's too drained, and how you can subtly step in to help with that. Or when your partner's too over-energized and you can kind of maybe figure out an outlet and see these different things. Maybe you are the balanced one and you can help other people become balanced. I'm balanced in my understanding of the body and its functions. That's why I do body work, because that's how I can best serve the community right now in that regard of I can help people work with their bodies and have conversations with them. I'm stepping into that realm with this whole thing of mentality. That's why I started this podcast of conversations about self-awareness and mental health. And it has now grown into this understanding of the spiritual side. And that's why I know there's always been something missing, because I can work on someone's body and I can really motivate the shit out of them with some of my motivational talk. Even though I am an introvert, I can just do motivational speaking and public speaking and get people riled up and get people understanding themselves. But even then, there can always be something lacking. And I've seen that for so fucking long now that it just irked the shit out of me that I had to look for something else. And that something else has been the spiritual conversations, the spiritual side of things. And so this is another reason I harp on the organized religion. You didn't think I'd be able to figure out how to get it into an episode, my harping on organized religion, because they simply only talk about the spiritual side of things, and they impose their thought, their reality, and they take over someone's spiritual energy epicenters and don't allow for true spiritual energy to enter a person and be used in the yin yang process or in their ki process, their prana, or their physical activity process. And they make it localized to a place or a function or an idea or an individual. And that's not how this fucking works, because people do need that spiritual representation. They do need that spiritual energy input so that they can better function in their other energy inputs and have balance between the body, mind, and spirit. And that's where my understanding of Trinity comes from. And that understanding has always been there throughout all other organizations and religions. They just don't talk about it enough. So I harp on them. And this is how I expend my energy. If you've noticed throughout this episode, I just happen to have some sort of energy coming through me that's just vomit words into the microphone and tell people about these things. So now that I take a breath, dynamic quality, the capacity of acting or being active, a usually positive spiritual force. I'd like you to go think about those in regard to yourself with a new, hopefully new understanding, or a budding or beginning understanding of this big thing we call energy, and how having a better understanding of it can give us better self-awareness, give us better mental health capacity, give us better mental health ability, and to understand our depression and the uniqueness of our depression and how we see the world and how you see the world, how you interact with it, how you interact with even just yourself, body, mind, and spirit. I thank you for your time. As always, I will get another episode together for you next week, and we'll talk then. Take care.